She called me weak the night she thought she'd won. Her voice was soft but sharp, a blade wrapped in silk. You'll never leave me, she said, smiling in that way that made cruelty look elegant. You don't have it in you. I didn't argue. I just nodded, watched her pour another glass of wine, and thought about how easy it was for people like her to mistake quiet for surrender. We'd been together 4 years, long enough for her to learn my silences but not my limits. She liked to test them. Affairs she didn't hide, insults disguised as jokes, control masquerading as care. I stayed, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to understand what kind of person finds joy in breaking what loves them. By the time I did, she'd already moved on to someone else, a younger man, louder, easier to manipulate. When she left, she said, "You'll regret not fighting for me." I didn't fight. I watched her go, and then I started to rebuild the world she'd hollowed out. The apartment, the routine, the quiet. I painted again, filled the rooms with color, light, music, everything she hated because she couldn't control it. Within months, I didn't recognize the person she used to call weak. Then, a year later, she called. "I miss you," she said, her voice fragile now. "He's not you." I could hear the lie beneath the confession. She didn't miss me. She missed who she was when I absorbed her cruelty without resistance. I told her I was busy, that I'd call her later. I never did. Weeks passed before I heard the rest, from a mutual friend who mentioned that her new boyfriend had left her. He said she was too much work, he laughed. I didn't. Because I knew what that kind of silence feels like. It's not punishment. It's the echo of your own making. A few months later, I ran into her downtown. She looked smaller somehow, wearing the same perfume she used to drown me in. "You look good," she said. "Different." I smiled. I stopped mistaking patience for weakness. She tried to laugh, but it came out cracked. "So you really don't hate me?" she asked. "No," I said. "Hate takes effort. I just stopped giving you space in my story." That night, as I walked home through the city she once said I was too soft for, I passed by her old building. The windows were dark, empty. And for a moment, I realized that revenge doesn't always scream, it lingers quietly. In the lives that go on after the storm. She called me weak once. But she's the one who sleeps alone now, haunted by the strength she mistook for surrender. She called me weak the night she packed her things. It wasn't anger in her voice, it was certainty. "You'll never be enough for someone like me," she said, zipping up her suitcase. "You don't know how to win." I didn't stop her. I didn't beg. I just watched her go, her perfume still heavy in the air. Like arrogance trying to disguise itself as confidence. For months after, I replayed that sentence until it lost meaning. Weak. It echoed through every room she'd once filled with noise. But grief is strange, it becomes discipline when you let it. I learned to cook for one, to sleep without checking my phone. To stop apologizing for the quiet. I didn't chase her, though I knew where she went. He was older, richer, louder, the kind of man who mistakes dominance for strength. She loved how people looked at them, not who he was. A year passed. Then 2. And one night, I saw her again. She was sitting alone at a rooftop bar. The kind of place she used to drag me to when she needed attention disguised as adventure. Her hair was shorter, her smile thinner. The waiter handed her a drink she didn't finish. When our eyes met, she froze. "You look different," she said. "Better." I smiled. That's what happens when you stop letting other people define your reflection. She laughed, soft, unsure. "So you're doing well?" I nodded. "Better than when you called me weak." The words hung there, light but heavy enough to make her flinch. She looked down, toyed with the straw, and whispered, "He left me. Said I was exhausting." I almost pitied her, but pity is just another form of attachment, and I'd already let that go. I stood to leave. She said, "Don't you ever think about what we could have been?" I turned back and said, "Every day. And every day I thank myself it never happened." Weeks later, a friend told me she'd moved out of the city, something about needing a quieter life. Funny, I thought. That was all I ever wanted too. Sometimes I walk past the bar where I found her, and I imagine her somewhere far away, looking at an empty bed and realizing what strength really sounds like. It isn't shouting, or power, or revenge, it's the peace that comes from being forgotten by someone you once underestimated. She called me weak, but I'm the reason she sleeps alone now. She called me weak the night she left, like she needed the word to hurt more than her absence. "You'll never do anything without me," she said, tossing her keys on the table. Smiling like cruelty was a form of honesty. I didn't argue. Weak people argue. I let her walk out, heels echoing through the hallway like punctuation marks in a sentence that didn't deserve to be finished. For months I lived in the aftermath, her scent still in the sheets, her voice in the walls, her shadow in every reflection. She moved in with someone else within weeks. A man who looked like everything she thought success was supposed to be. I heard about their dinners, their vacations, their carefully staged happiness. Everyone said she'd traded up. I said nothing. Because silence, I was learning, is the most patient weapon. I started rebuilding. Quietly. A new job. A new apartment. A new routine that didn't orbit her moods. The art studio she said was a waste of rent became my sanctuary. I painted late into the night, shapes and colors she never would have understood. It was there that I met Mira, one of my clients. She owned a gallery. She said my work felt like revenge painted with restraint. I didn't correct her. 6 months later, my first exhibition opened. The theme was absence. Every canvas told a story of leaving without rage. People called it haunting. One critic called it a masterclass in quiet devastation. The night of the opening, she showed up. The woman who once called me weak. Dressed in confidence that didn't fit anymore. She lingered by a piece titled Her Voice, My Silence, a painting of a door half open, half closed, painted in shades of ash and gold. When she realized it was about her, she turned to me. "You're angry," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm finished." She laughed weakly. "You always did take your time. I learned from you," I said. Patience makes the wound deeper. A week later, I heard she'd left the man she chose over me. Moved out, disappeared, started over somewhere smaller. Alone. I didn't feel joy, just peace. Because the truth is, I didn't ruin her life, she did. I just stopped cushioning the fall. Sometimes, when I close the studio late at night, I think of her standing in front of that painting. Realizing too late that weakness isn't breaking quietly. It's believing you'll never be the reason someone learns how to rebuild. And that's what she'll remember. She called me weak, but I'm the reason she sleeps alone now. She called me weak the last night we ever fought. Her voice sharp enough to cut through the dark. "You'll never make it without me," she said, holding her glass like a trophy. "You're scared of being alone." I didn't answer. I was scared, yes, but not of being alone. I was scared of what I might become if I stayed. When she finally walked out, the apartment went quiet in a way that felt holy. I didn't try to stop her, didn't call, didn't beg. I just stood there, staring at the dent her perfume had left in the air. and promised myself that the next time someone called me weak, I'd let them choke on the silence that followed. Months passed. She moved in with someone else, a man who posted photos of her like she was proof of something. They looked happy, the way people look when they're pretending. I didn't stalk, didn't compare. I rebuilt, found work that didn't drain me, painted again, read books without her commentary in my ear, learned the pleasure of mornings that didn't start with walking on eggshells. Then one evening, almost a year later, I saw her again. She came to my art show, the first one I'd ever hosted. I didn't invite her, but someone must have. She walked through the crowd like she still owned the room. But her eyes couldn't find anyone who looked at her the way they used to. She stopped in front of a painting called The After. It was a self-portrait, a man standing in a room half lit, one side empty, the other alive with color. She stared for a long time. When she finally approached me, her voice was small. "You've changed," she said. "You seem stronger." I smiled, polite but distant. I stopped mistaking peace for weakness. She tried to laugh, that old condescending tone flickering for a moment, but it died halfway. "He left me," she said finally. "Said I was too cold." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger. Just freedom. "I guess we finally agree on something," I said quietly. "Some people can't stand the warmth of what they don't deserve." She didn't reply, just left, slowly, through the same door she'd once slammed behind her. And as I watched her disappear into the crowd, I realized revenge wasn't the fire she expected, it was the calm that came after. She called me weak once, but now it's her reflection that trembles when the lights go out. I'm the reason she sleeps alone, and the reason I finally sleep in peace. She called me weak the night I stopped fighting back. "You used to care," she said, her voice calm, calculated, as if she were studying me like one of her psychology case files. "Now you just sit there, taking it. Pathetic." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't see someone I loved, I saw someone performing love like a cruel habit. So I stayed quiet, let her think she'd won. When she left, she didn't cry. She didn't slam the door or make it dramatic. She simply said, "You'll come crawling back when you realize no one else will love you." That was her final prophecy. I didn't argue. I let her have her illusion. The silence that followed was colder than grief, but it was clean. The first few months were survival, cheap meals, quiet nights, learning how to breathe without checking my phone. Then it turned into creation. I started writing again, something she'd always mocked as your little hobby. The words came fast, raw, soaked in memory and aftermath. It wasn't about her, not directly, but her fingerprints were everywhere, on every betrayal, every manipulation, every silence I had swallowed. I didn't plan on showing it to anyone. But pain has a way of finding its own audience. 6 months later, a friend submitted one of my essays to a literary magazine without telling me. It went viral. Editors called. Publishers emailed. Suddenly, I wasn't weak, I was the voice of 1,000 people who'd been told they were. The book that followed was titled The Quiet Kind of Strength. I didn't dedicate it to her, but she lived between every line. When the book tour began, I saw her again. She came to one of the readings, sitting in the back row, pretending she hadn't. Her eyes were glassy, and when I signed books after, she stood in line like everyone else. When she reached me, she smiled that same condescending smile I used to mistake for affection. "I didn't know you had this in you," she said softly. "Guess I was wrong." I met her eyes. You weren't wrong, I said. You just didn't stay long enough to see what survival looks like. She didn't buy the book. She left before I finished signing the next one. Later, I learned she'd broken up with the man she left me for. Moved back to her hometown. Alone. Sometimes people ask if the quiet kind of strength was written out of revenge. I tell them no, it was written out of reclamation. But when I think about her, in that empty apartment she once said I wasn't brave enough to leave, I realize maybe it was both. Because she called me weak, and now my words keep her awake at night. In the silence she built for herself.